All right. I first want to check in on the consent process. Have you reviewed that and you're in agreement with moving forward with that consent process?
That's fine, Natalie. I agree.
Okay, perfect. All right. So the interview today, it's broken out in three categories. The first is asking about your interest in monetary reform. The
Mm-hmm.
second is asking about strategies for winning monetary reform, including engaging coalitions. And then the third is around specific proposals for how monetary systems could operate in the future.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Excellent. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so the question that I'll start with is what's the story about how you came to do the monetary reform advocacy
Okay,
work you're doing today?
great, great. I wrote a book, Natalie.
Mm,
It's called Confessions of an Islamic Banker.
okay.
You may have heard. So that tells you that I was a banker and an Islamic banker for uh, 24 plus 34 years.
Wow.
I'm a Islamic banker for 34 years.
Wow.
So after a while, I begin to ask myself, with so many banks in the world, how come there is still poverty gap?
Mm-hmm.
How come people in normal urban rural areas still suffer?
Yeah.
Uh, the prices are hitting them. Their wages are not going up,
Mm-hmm.
and the bank seems to be over focused on giving personal loans and credit cards,
Mm-hmm.
less so on the real economy to
Mm-hmm.
create jobs and economic output.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I found an NGO called Positive Money UK. You may have heard.
Mm-hmm.
They were the front leader in monetary reform. I learned a lot from their research, and I begin to realize that our problem is actually with a monetary reform, with a monetary system, which was imposed on us
Mm-hmm.
without asking us whether we wanted it or not. You know, so
Mm-hmm.
it's the more I research, the more I inquire, I begin to see the concerted early efforts to
Mm-hmm.
determine this system is operational all over the world, and it's so hidden that you really do not know uh, who's behind it, who invented it, and
Right.
what is the real effect. The most amazing thing is it hides the fact of what is money. You
Mm-hmm.
go to any country today, I think many people do not know what money is.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask them what is money, they take out their wallet or their purse and they will show you the notes and coins. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we know that is only between 3 to 5% of the total money.
Mm-hmm.
And then we research further and we find that banks do not lend from deposits. It could well be at the beginning the bank do lend from deposits, but later on there is a system that the central bank allows the bank to create the deposit. Every time a loan is given, it is based on a created accounting entry deposit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I talk to ordinary people in Malaysia, I tell them, I apologize that my topic is monetary reform because it's so difficult to understand what it's all about. When you mention monetary reform, they will go into a haze and say, "Oh my God, that's beyond me," you know. Whereas the ill effects of monetary reform affects them directly. It
Yeah.
affects their children not getting proper jobs,
Yeah.
and those who are able to get jobs get very puny, stunted wages and salaries. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, the wages and salaries of the parents also is very much stunted.
Mm-hmm.
So that is how I begin to find out about the whole thing, and then with some people interested in the same subject, we formed a monetary reform group in Malaysia called Movement for Monetary Justice Malaysia. And later on, we joined the international organization called International Movement for Monetary Reform. I'm, in fact, presently the president.
Oh, beautiful.
Chairman, chairman of my, we call it NGO. I think in other places they call it NPO. And and I'm also a core group member of 5 people in the International Movement for Monetary Reform. I think that summarizes my interest in the.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Were there any mentors that you had along the way?
Yeah. I did my degree in the UK a long time ago, economics degree. But when I did my master's, I did it in the International Islamic University in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, master's in Islamic banking and finance. And there is a professor, one of my lecturers, Professor Ahmad Maidin, who is actually one of the key pioneers in monetary reform in Malaysia. He wrote a book called The Theft of Nations. I don't know whether you're familiar. I'm sure you're familiar. Adam Smith wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations. Okay? So my professor wrote a book called The Theft of Nations. So his realization of what has happened is quite advanced. I mean, at a time when nobody thought about it, nobody realized what it's all about. And actually, Natalie, many of the academicians, many of the lecturers, especially economic lecturers in Malaysia and in the world, they do not understand monetary reform. They do not understand banks create money. And they keep teaching their students even today at this very minute. They are teaching their students that a bank is an innocent mover of funds from surplus units to deficit units. A bank actually lend from deposits. If there are no deposits, a bank cannot lend. That is what they are actually teaching the students today. And we all know, and I'm being a banker myself, I understand very deeply the accounting aspects. There is something called loan to deposit ratio. I don't know whether you've come across that statement, where the central banks tells all banks, when you lend, please make sure your loan to deposit ratio does not exceed 80%. Understand? So for example, they're telling you, if you have 100 million US dollar deposit, your loan should not exceed 80 million. It's sort of a prudent arrangement. But what they never tell you, when we talk about 80%, 80 million loans to 100 million deposit, our natural assumption is the 100 million deposit are all cash deposits. Deposits ordinary people place in the bank. What they don't tell you, and I know for a fact now, what they don't tell you is that 80 million are loans that are going out. Out of the 100 million, only 30 million are cash deposits. 70 million are accounting entry deposits. So this is the magic, the trick, the thing that they have hidden from us, even to the extent our academicians don't understand. So it's our job to expose this lie to the world. And let me just go a bit more to explain why this is bad, why banks creating money is bad. To me, there is nothing wrong with banks creating money. What is wrong is where they are pointing the money to, where they lend. So in most countries in the world today, 80% of loans are to what we call the personal sector. means it goes to the personal loan, credit card, housing, and cars. The part that goes to the real economy, to the companies, to the restaurant, to the laundries, to the factories, to the farms that create economic output and also create employment, in the world today is only 20%. Now, these are facts which we must memorize, because that would explain the problem in the world today. Of the 20% that goes to the real economy, okay, only in the world, only 7% goes to what we call the SME sector, small, medium enterprise. In some countries, they refer that as the small businesses sector. The relevance of that, Natalie, is that the small businesses sector, which by definition is companies with sales of 50 million US dollar and below, create 70% of jobs in all nations. So if you imagine of the bank, total bank loans, only 7% goes to the small business sector that creates 70% of job, you can imagine the unemployment of our youth and our graduates every year. Every year, our graduates, our youth come out to the job market. The job is not there. Therefore, number one, there will be youth unemployment. And if you check with on the internet, in the world today, there are 65 million youth unemployed. Okay? And for those who are lucky enough to get jobs, their wages and salary are so small because there are too many people chasing too few jobs. So therefore, the employers can, for example, I think you can check this. You can check what is the starting salary of an engineer in Jamaica today. And then you check what is the starting salary of the engineer 20 years ago. You'll find that that's not much movement, you know? Whereas the housing prices, the car price, everything has gone up. So those who are lucky enough to get jobs, their salaries are too low. And actually, the parents' salaries also are too low. And this is hidden from the education system. So that is another thing that we must realize. We must realize that our problem is not just the monetary system. Our education system hides the ugliness of the monetary system. Your economics lecturer, which are the people, the economists, the people we rely on to advise us, they have not a clue. So basically, Natalie, monetary reformers have a huge responsibility to redress the situation, and first of all, to inform the world about the situation. I'm a very experienced speaker, Natalie. If you allow me, I will not stop. You know, you have to stop and ask questions. I give a lot of thought all over the world.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah. Next question.
So you've already been speaking to this, but in case you'd like to add more, this question is, what are the top 2 or 3 most problematic aspects of the current monetary system?
Okay. When we must realize when bank creates a deposit, when they make a loan, okay, let me make it a bit clearer. Let's say we start a new bank. So when you start a new bank, you actually collect real cash deposits from people. All right. So maybe we collected 30 million US dollar real cash, and then we lend out 80% of that. Okay. Now technically, we should stop, but central bank say you can continue lending by the accounting trick of every time you make a loan. Maybe you have a company in Jamaica. You are given a 1 million US dollar loan. So instead of that money coming from the cash deposit, the bank is allowed to create an accounting entry, 1 million deposit, 1 million loan. Okay. So in other words, the bank create the deposit, and in other words, the bank create. This is new money. This is actually new money that is introduced to the economy. All right. So in the world today, 80% of bank loans are to the personal sector, to the personal loans. So the effect of this is, number one, if it is given in the form of personal loan and credit cards, it means new money is created, but goods and services are not created. Therefore, that country is landed with huge permanent inflation. That is why the prices at the supermarket, etc., continually goes up non-stop. Okay. On the other hand, if it goes to housing, for example, I'm assuming that the housing is the same in all over the world. If it is banks, they like housing. If they focus too much on housing, the house prices will go up beyond our capability. So what's happening is, in Malaysia, people are still buying houses. But if you examine the more mature economy, like Germany or Switzerland, you will find out that nobody can afford to buy houses anymore. Everybody is renting. So from the personal side, there will be permanent inflation that eats away at your salary. And there will be, for housing and cars, the prices keep going up, and it does not match your capability to spend. The increase in your salary is too low compared to the increase in the prices. That's one.
Right.
And then, as I said, when the bank loans do not go to the real sector, jobs are not created. When jobs are not created, there will be unemployed graduates, unemployed youth. And for those who are lucky enough to get jobs, their salary is too small. And generally, the salaries of the parents also are too small. So it's a double whammy, Natalie. We are hit by the prices going up, and we are hit by the wages salaries being too low. Okay, so that is basically the main issue. And then, of course, there are many other side effects. For example, the wealth gap between the poor and the rich, by default of the system, it gets wider and wider and wider. So that is the most, especially the unemployment. If you Google unemployment in every nation, you'll find a ranking list. And in total, it's about 65 million youth unemployed because of the monetary system. So that is why it is compulsory for us to to fight and change the system.
All right, thank you for that. So for these next questions, they're focused on any strategy and planning conversations that you've been a part of, like kind of getting the zeitgeist of the monetary movement in those conversations. So the first question here is, in the strategy conversations you've been a part of, where do you see general agreement about which aspects of the monetary system are most problematic and therefore most in need of change? So where there's general agreement.
So the main problem the monetary system, one is, of course, the permanent stealing of the theft of the purchasing power, and number two, the unemployment.
Okay, so there's usually agreement within
yeah.
groups on that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you are asking about are you asking about the strategy that we have?
We'll get into the strategy.
Okay, right.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Where do you see general agreement about how the current monetary system should work in the future?
Oh, that's a question, is it?
Yeah.
How okay. First of all, I need to make a proviso that in every nation, the solution will be slightly different. For example, the US is way different from us. I mean, the central bank is owned and not owned by the government. Okay, so the solution that is most popular at the moment and actually propagated by Positive Money of the UK is one called sovereign money. Okay? This is the solution that we are promoting throughout the world. And the way it is promoted is different in every country. Let me explain what it is first. Okay. Now, we have established that banks create 90%, 95 to 97% of money. Okay. The government, through the central banks, only create 3 to 5% of money in the form of notes and coins. The balance of money in every country in the whole world are created by banks in terms of numbers. This money are numbers that moves from bank account to bank account. Okay, so these are created by the banks. All right. So the problem, as I laid out just now, is that if the banks had focused the money on the real economy, it's very difficult for us to fault them, because and in every economy, money is required. Without money, there will be no economic development. You know what we call liquidity. Yeah? So if in a country banks create money, but the money is focused on the real economy, we cannot fault that. That's fine. Okay. The problem with banks creating money is that they focus only 7%. They focus 20% to the real economy, or 80% in the personal sector, which creates permanent inflation, and it creates unemployment. Okay, so what most people are proposing under what we call a sovereign money solution is to take away the money creating ability from the banks. All right. So the solution has been, as originally proposed by Positive Money UK, is to, well, let me talk about Malaysia's model. Okay, easier that way. So in our model, money no longer able to be created by the banks, should be created by a central monetary authority, which do not report to the ruling government, but reports to parliament. All right. That's very important. Very important, because the minute Central Monetary Authority reports to the ruling government, then people will scream Zimbabwe. So we address that upfront. We address that upfront. We said money to be created only by the Central Monetary Authority that is independent of the ruling government and reports to parliament. All right. So basically what happens, in the beginning of the year, if the government needs money, they need to table the budget to the Central Monetary Authority. The Central Monetary Authority will decide how much, and then this will be tabled to Parliament. So in other words, banks do not create the money. And when the Central Monetary Authority create the money, almost 100% goes to the real economy. In Malaysia, we recommend another institution. We call it the State Investment Bank. So the Central Monetary Authority, upon approving the money, will pass it to the State Investment Bank, who will focus the loan on the real sector. So what will happen is the money created in the economy goes to the real sector, economic output goes up, employment goes up, right? And that is the key formula that we're trying to impose. And the banks will allow them to continue, but they have to choose into being one of two type of banks. Number one, they can choose to be what we call payment system banks. Now, these payment system banks, they are responsible for making the payments in the country. In other words, it's like your debit card. You know? They will only pay what's inside there. They cannot create new money. So you have an account with them, you put 10,000 US dollar, and then they can only move your payments up to 10,000 US dollar. They don't have the ability to create money. Alternatively, they can be what we call the fund managing bank. The fund managing bank is they collect money, deposits from people, and
Mhm.
then they invest or they lend in certain industries. All right. So, in other words, things that go to the personal sector are, I won't say zero, but it's limited. All right. So there will be no inflation in the country. There'll be no unemployment. The house prices will be come down, rocketing. Instead of rocketing house prices, it will come down. You will have
Mhm.
youth employment. You have proper wages for the ordinary people. The
Mhm.
gap in poverty gap will narrow, and then generally everybody's happy.
Mhm.
Who is not happy? The bank owner.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, Now let me tell you a bit background regarding the bank owners, who they are. Okay,
Mhm.
we have a fair idea of what we
Mhm.
are fighting against. All right.
Right.
So now I'm treading on sensitive ground, but I need to say this. Okay,
Mhm.
it all began with the Federal Reserve of the U.S.
Mhm.
There is a book, Natalie, called "The Creature from Jekyll Island."
Mhm.
Somebody called Griffins. If you Google that, you'll find that.
Mhm.
So sometime in 1910, 5 banking families meet in an island in New York called Jekyll Island. Okay.
Mhm.
Their intention was to form a central bank, not owned by the government, but owned by themselves. They
Mhm.
want to hide the fact that banks are able to create money. So what they did was, roughly in 1910, on Christmas Eve,
Mhm.
the night of Christmas Eve, they tabled the Federal Reserve Act. The
Mhm.
next day, the Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of America, was formed, not owned
Oh.
by the government, but owned by 5 banking families. Okay. Now, throughout the world, things are a bit different. Throughout the world, central banks are owned by the government. So they wanted to make sure that the whole world is practicing the same system. Because you imagine, if a bank can create money, and you not only own the bank, you own the central bank. I mean, the power that you have, wow, So they want to make sure that every country in the world practices the same system. Okay.
Mhm.
What they did was, there was a bank in Basel, Switzerland. It's called the Bank of International Settlements. All right.
Mhm.
This bank was set up after World War II to cater for war reparation payments by Germany, something like that, lah. So they took over this bank. And then what they did was, they issued what they call Basel Accords, which are banking rules, which is uh, issued to all the countries in the world. And what happened was, all the governors, the central bank governors from Jamaica, from Malaysia, from India, from Bangladesh, they go to Basel twice a year.
Mhm.
They get the red carpet treatment, wine and dine. These governors are wine and then they are told, literally they are told by the board of Bank of International Settlements, they are literally told, you are God's gift to your nation. And so they go back to their own nation and they implement the policies
Mhm.
determined by the Bank of International Settlements. All right. So I'm not saying the buzzwords, but if you can hear what I'm not saying, I think you are
Mhm.
hearing it quite clearly. Yeah. So
Mhm.
basically, you need to understand that context. You need to
Yeah.
understand context in order to understand the reform. That's why I fully salute our monetary reformers in the US. They have a very tough battle
Yeah.
compared to us over here. So
Mhm.
that you need to understand that. So basically, in order to reform your monetary system, you need to implement sovereign money.
Yeah.
In which case, banks no longer create money. Money
Mhm.
created central monetary authority given to the real economy. Economic output goes up, employment goes up, salaries goes up, house prices goes down, and generally people are happy. Okay, uh, if
Yeah.
they can implement it, they will
Mhm.
get a lot of pressure from Bank of International Settlements.
Mhm.
That's why for a nation, actually, Jamaica,
Mhm.
sorry, for a nation, Natalie, it's best that we don't borrow
Yeah.
internationally. Once you borrow internationally, then you have lost your control over your nation. Yeah, I hope that of course, coming from a Muslim country, we have certain other tweaks that we will put inside the system. But
Yeah.
generally at that part, up to that part, same as in other countries.
What would the tweaks be from a Muslim perspective?
Okay.
I'm curious.
You see, Natalie, usury, all right, is banned by all religions. Okay, not just Islam, is banned by Christianity. Banking started in Venice in the 15th century. But because the church forbid usury, the lending, the business of lending was not done by the Christian merchants. Okay, they were done by people the Christian merchants brought in from outside, given the capital, and they are the ones who do the lending with interest. All right, and in Italy, they work on a they write and they put the money on the bench. Okay, in Italian, a bench is called banco. That is where the origin of the word banks come from. Okay, and then there were a lot of fights to redefine usury. You lost. The Christian faith lost. So they managed to redefine usury as excessive interest. Okay? A mere 1%, 2%, 3% is not usurious. Okay? And that is what you are living under at the moment. They failed to do that in Islam. In Islam, we maintain that 0.1% is usurious because we're not concerned with the size of the interest, we're concerned with the allocation of risk between the two parties. So in a business relationship, you and I, we share profits and losses. Okay. Now, if there is a business relationship where one party is free of all risk and the other party bears 100% of the risk, to us, 0.1% is usurious. You understand? It is a very unfair relationship. So that is one of the basic difference with the tweaks that you asking about. We have a movement for monetary justice, have a model. We will implement what we call Musyarakah Investment House. Musyarakah is an Islamic principle. It's joint venture profit and loss sharing. Yeah? I have developed a system, being an ex-banker, I have developed a system where we can replace debt lending with this equity financing. And by doing so, you'll get more money going to the small businesses sector. And you get more economic output, you get more employment, and you get higher wages. But of course, I tried with Brunei. You heard about Brunei, the small, very rich, oil-rich nation next to us in Borneo. I tried there. Of course, not successful. It's quite tough. So, but if ever we are successful in Malaysia, that will be implemented here.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay. What are some places where you see significant disagreements about the biggest problems and the best solutions?
Okay, now this is a personal view of, as I mentioned to you, I've been in core member of the International Movement for Monetary Reforms for quite a while. I am by training an economist myself, okay? But I have pointed out there is also, Natalie, that we should recognize, there is also an NPO called Reform Economics, okay? This, it started with a group of Dutch students in a university in Netherlands.
Mhm.
You know, economics, first of all, economists do not understand where money come from. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm talking about the basic subject that's been taught at the university.
Mhm.
They believe banks are new instead of havoc money creators, creating havoc for the nation. They believe banks are innocent, ordinary institution that move deposits, that move money from deposits to loan. Okay, that's number two. They never discuss about the havoc money creation by banks. You look up in any economic textbook, you will never find this. You know, find it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, and then they talk about an investment will happen in a country when the savings equals investment. S equals I. Yeah? And if you look up in economic textbook, you'll find that. So
Mhm.
if we are able to raise savings in the country, and then we will have the investment. But for us monetary reformers, we know that savings is immaterial to development in the country.
Mhm.
There will be things will happen in the country where the banks agree to focus the loan on. So actually, the country do not need saving. The country just have given the money creation ability to the banks, and the banks are the people who decide whether there'll be investment, whether there'll be personal loans, etc.
Yes.
So these are very, very basic facts. And then I have an article. If you go to the International Movement for Monetary Reform website, I wrote a small article about economists. So if you ask an economist, Natalie, during COVID recently, how do you help the people who are suffering from COVID? They will say, lower the interest rate. And then we say, how do you help the small, the inflation, to remove the inflation in the country? You raise the interest rate. How do you have your currency, foreign exchange rate? You know, how do you make it stronger? You raise the interest rate. And how do you lower the house prices? You lower the interest rate. So if you listen to their answer, Natalie, it's either raise interest rate or lower interest rate. Raise it, lower interest rate. So if you have 10 problems, your interest rate will go like that. Is not really a solution, to be honest. Interest rate is not really a solution. It is their excuse for the system to be as it is. And there is an article by Professor Werner for University of Southampton. He's a very, very famous monetary reform academician. He just declared that interest rate does not affect the economy. So what was your original question?
Yeah. Within the monetary movement, where you've seen a significant
Okay.
agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the challenge. This is the challenge, Natalie, because our minds, we are focused on universities, research papers, etc. Now, the universities, the research papers are basically along the subjects of economics. All right. We do not see too much on monetary reformist articles. Okay. Therefore, we tend to. Do you understand the word kowtow? Kowtow. It's like kowtow means we tend to defer. We tend to put too much respect, and we tend to defer to the opinions of the economists. Right. But the problem with the economists is what I just told you. The problem is they got things wrong. So they got the basic lending wrong. They say it comes from deposit and all that. And there are the Dutch students were protesting and demanding that the economics lecturers teach them the correct subject. So what I'm trying to say is if monetary reformists do not maintain their independence, do not focus on the articles and the research done by monetary reformists, but they rely on the findings of
Mm,
economists, then
mm,
I think they will be distracted from the main fight. And
yeah.
the other thing is, if you listen to the problems that the economists wanting to solve compared to the problem the monetary reformists want to solve,
Mm,
the economists, they want to have stability in the system. They talk about climate changes.
mm,
Those are the things they focus on. Whereas we want to create jobs for people. We
mm,
want to alleviate human suffering. We want to lower
yeah.
the house prices, lower inflation, improve their salaries. So
Right.
it's very different. So we need to be careful. This is the message I'm trying to pass to the international monetary reformers. Be
Mm-hmm.
careful. But if you put too much deference to the economists, they take you on a different path. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm making myself clear.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
All right. So we know that ultimately changing monetary systems requires changing laws, which requires winning policymakers' support for those changes.
Yeah,
So in
absolutely.
strategy conversations that you've been a part of, what are
Yeah.
the what's been seen as the best ways to win the policymakers' support that would be required for changing the monetary and banking laws?
Thank you. Thank you. I like that question. That describes
Mhm.
what I have been going through for the past 5 or
Mm,
6 years. So the Prime Minister of Malaysia came from my school.
mm,
It's my senior. So I thought that I could implement monetary reform through politicians or governing politicians who are sympathetic to our rules. But remember what I said just now, Natalie. It's
mm,
not just about the monetary system, it's also about the education system. Okay?
mm,
So when people grew up in an education system that's hidden, where the monetary faults are hidden, it's
mm,
very difficult to break through. And
mhm,
then those in power will say to you, oh, actually, I'm taking advice from my economics professors. They are telling me what you're saying is wrong. They're
mm,
telling me banks are very nice organization. They're telling me bank lend from deposits. So what's the problem? So,
mhm,
so what I'm trying to say, uh, I've talked to all the political parties on both sides of the divide in Malaysia. I
mhm,
do not think that I can do my reform through them. So
mm,
what the conclusion my NPO has arrived at, Natalie, is we will go all out to inform the public, to
mm,
educate the public regarding the monetary system. And
mhm,
hopefully one day we will reach the critical mass where
mhm,
they will demand us to take political power, to be quite frank with you, because we have tried. Maybe in other countries it's more successful. We have tried in Malaysia with the
yeah,
ruling politician, the opposition politician. We
mhm,
do not think that it can be done. In any case, they have a very short time frame.
mm,
A very short time. Monetary reform requires a longer time frame. They have a very short time frame, and then it's not for them to implement. It may
mhm,
be bad for their electoral votes, in
mm,
the beginning. Although in the end it will benefit the constituents. So to answer your question, we have arrived at the stage where we feel the only way forward. But I emphasize any of the monetary reform all the MPOs want to implement cannot be done without political power. Okay, they need
mm,
to go there. They need to be there. They need to go there. If they are lucky enough, some of us in the reform group have contested as MPs everywhere, and
mhm,
in Italy, in New Zealand, those are very good efforts. So in other
mhm,
words, and then you might want to study the money reform party of Canada.
mm,
This reformist party in Canada, Natalie, they managed to control what's the name of the state? It's one of the states in Canada. They control it, and they were able to implement what we are just talking about.
Mhm.
This was between 1910 and 1970.
Mm.
Alberta.
Oh,
All right, that's the
okay.
name,
Mhm.
Alberta.
Mhm.
And if you study that, they were able to implement many of the things that we're talking about. But in 1970, they were killed off by the private bankers. They were private bank. So in other words, my message is you cannot really do it without
Mhm.
political power. You'll
When you
find
said
that
they were killed, do you mean like physically or the idea?
uh, they were in power in Alberta,
Okay.
and then their opponent have got lots of money.
Okay.
Their opponent funded the opposition
Mm.
party to kill off their party.
Wow.
So they in 1970, the Monetary Reform Party of Canada, something like that, of Alberta, eventually lost
Mhm.
control of the government, and they had to give up
Mhm.
the party, and that's
Mhm.
the end of the monetary reform. But if you study that period, there's a book by Ellen Brown. You study that period, you'll find the success that has been done by,
Mhm.
and also, Natalie, in the early 20th century, Bank of Australia,
Mhm.
Bank of New Zealand, they were very, very successful. They were owned by the government. 100% of their loans, almost 100% of the loan goes to the real economy infrastructure. They develop Australia. They
Mhm.
developed New Zealand. But their life was ended by the private bankers. You find this book, Public Banking Solution by Ellen Brown.
Mhm.
She described all this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you. All right.
You have 10 minutes.
I have
have
10
2
minutes. Wow.
8:30. I have one monetary forum and another interview by 11 o'clock. Oh my God.
Oh,
It's a busy day today.
so popular.
Just for today, just for today. I don't know
Okay.
why.
So I have a good few more questions to go,
Sure.
but we could schedule a part two of this conversation if you're open to that.
No problem, no problem.
Okay. All right. So we can wrap up this section then if we have enough time.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this next question is asking about the shortcomings of the strategies, different strategies that have been put on the table.
Mhm.
Um,
Shortcomings, okay?
yeah, yeah, any shortcomings or barriers seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. First of all, the international movement for monetary reform need to recognize every nation has a different solution. Huh?
Mhm.
We have a different set of laws. We have a different set of circumstances. So
Mhm.
one perfect model cannot fit all. You
Mhm.
may use the main principle, for example, sovereign money, but this has to be tweaked to meet the local requirement. Huh?
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I see the main thing is to get the public aware in every nation. The main thing is to get the public aware. So that really depends on the monetary reformers in each country. Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, some of the NGOs in some countries are quite small.
Mhm.
So the ones that are more successful
Mhm.
need to help the smaller ones to give them a hand, because we are actually fighting a very powerful vested interest,
Oh.
So it's not easy. It's not easy. So at the moment, unfortunately, apart from some countries, unfortunately, is a part-time
Mhm.
fight by certain, maybe a one-man show, So the international movement for monetary reform need to help all the smaller NPOs to make them stronger, because they are doing it for humankind. They're doing it for the nation. We are talking about helping human beings improve their lives, to
Mhm.
give. I mean, I was in Nigeria Natalie, a few years ago, on doing some consultancy work. So the unemployment that's quite high.
Mm.
What the government did was they wanted to create jobs. So they created this post called traffic officers. Okay. And they need maybe about, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they need mainly about 10,000 traffic officers. That's all. Okay. And then they started to advertise. 250,000 applicants applied.
Wow.
So this is Nigeria. I'm saying that this is happening in almost every country. You
Right.
have people suffering. These are real suffering. And you remember Bangladesh recently? Did you read about Bangladesh?
No.
There was a riot because Bangladesh got independent 20 years ago to repay the debt of the freedom fighters. The government had a policy where certain jobs is a legacy job for future generations of the freedom fighters. But because they are also operating the same system that we are operating everywhere in the world, youth unemployment is very, very high. Those youth who are not descendants of the freedom fighter begin to question this quota. In the end, there was a big fight, huge riot, many people died.
Wow.
The president had to leave the government. They have a new president. So we are talking about people who are suffering, real suffering, people who died. So I mean, that is why when I hear economists shouting about climate change, but economic stability, I'm sorry, I get quite riled up. I mean, we are talking about bringing change for the people. So therefore, it's a very serious fight for the world to take. And I think you should form an NGO for Jamaica if you are the so that it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's my message. Yeah.
All right. So I know we're at time and I so enjoyed talking to you. I
No problem.
really did, which is also why I wasn't trying to cut you off to get to the next question because I was, learning so much. So I'll send an email so that we can schedule a part 2 of our conversation and you can choose a time that works well for you.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that, Natalie.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again for your time and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.